The Carlisle Village Council meeting to order. Would everyone please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Bicknell.
Here.
Mr. Jewett.
Here.
Mr. McIntosh.
Here.
Ms. Tankersley.
Here.
Mr. Humphries.
Here.
Mayor Winkler.
Here. First of all, we have a motion to suspend the reading of the minutes by the clerk.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Tankersley.
Yes.
Mr. Humphries.
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell.
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh.
Yes.
Mr. Jewett.
Yes.
Mayor Winkler.
Yes. Before you are the minutes of a regular meeting of July 24th. Is there any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, is there a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mr. McIntosh.
Yes.
Mr. Jewett.
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley.
Yes.
Mr. Humphries.
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell.
Yes.
Mayor Winkler.
Yes. Regular minutes of July 24th have been adopted. Next on our agenda is our public forum. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address council? Please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please. Seeing none, we'll close the public forum. We'll move on to council reports. Mr. Jewett, would you like to start this evening?
I just want to make notice, as everyone probably realizes that came in this evening, we're heading back into school session, and many kids around the school over there with cheerleading practice, football practice. I just asked everyone, slow down in that area and keep your eye on the kids, and let's start out the year on a good note. That's all I have this evening.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bicknell?
I just wanted to thank the police department, gyms, Carlisle Fire Department for their presence at the National Night Out last week. I believe there was a very good turnout with the amount of people that came out. I think the skydiver coming in, I think there was definitely good presence, and it was a good time for people to come out. So I'd like to thank the police department then for putting that on. It was great to see the community come out and support and kind of just see how those things are run. Also, I know gyms on Saturday will be putting on another CPR session this weekend, I believe, on Saturday. Is that correct, Mr. Stephanie? Yes.
I have to look back to my notes.
I think it is.
It is.
I believe so. And then just to piggyback off of Mr. Jewett, we're getting back into school next week, so we're going to have a lot of traffic, and especially with the fall sports and everything beginning. So just be careful and be cognizant of your surroundings and kids running around. That is all.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McIntosh?
Yeah, a couple things. First off, I'd like to say congratulations to Mr. Bicknell on the birth of his third child. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
I would like to echo his comments on National Night Out. Would like to thank Chief Brock, Officer Zarnota, and everyone on the police department, along with the fire department, gyms, the vendors that were present, the State Farm Agency, Church in the Village, Lions Club was there. It was a great night. It was a good event. I was very impressed with the attendance. I think there's a lot of room to even make it even better next year, as Chief has indicated he'd like to do. So I just commend them on their hard work and for pulling that together. I appreciate that. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who did apply for the open council seat. We will begin reviewing those and work through that process. But that's the most interest we've had in a while on council vacancies, so I do appreciate that interest for that seat. Just a quick reminder, and it probably won't be seen in time, but Railroad Days is this weekend. Friday and Saturday, parade's on Saturday morning. That'll be running Friday evening and all day Saturday. The Lions Club is having their Big T Day at the Lions Club facility this year instead of down at Phil's Auto. So if you could support both events this weekend, that would be great. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Tankersley?
Yeah, I want to thank everyone who came out for National Night Out, all the police, fire, everyone that helped with it. It was a good turnout. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Humphries.
First off, I'd like to follow up with the Carlisle Crossing, AKA Du Bois Apartments. I'd like to thank staff for following through with the topic. They have presented a one-year plan with quarterly timelines, so it appears that something is going to be done. They've got an action plan, and it looks like they're going to try to work it. So I think that's a positive thing for that end of the community. And I'd like to echo what the rest of council has said. National Night Out, I believe, was a success. The businesses that stepped up to support it financially and that actually physically showing up, it just shows that there's times that our community can kind of come together and have a neat little event like that. And I hope to see more things of that nature come around. So that's what I have this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll close the council reports, move on to mayor's report. Hate to be redundant, but thanks for National Night Out and all the folks involved in that. It was a great event. Really enjoyed being there and talking with a lot of our citizens. Secondly, with the Railroad Days coming up this weekend, they have the parade on Saturday morning. Is council's interest in being in the parade? I think it starts at 9 a.m., I believe, with lining up starting at around 8 o'clock at Roscoe Roof Park. So,
I don't have my schedule for Saturday yet.
okay. Working?
I'm working.
Okay.
I can be there.
Yeah, I can be there as well.
I can be there.
Okay. We'll figure out something here to get us down the road on or walk or something, so.
We'll reach out to the
I know,
parade
okay.
and let them know that we'll be participating,
Okay.
so they can add us to the lineup. Well, when I say I, of course, I mean Jenny.
We'll be fine.
Okay. We'll-
Okay.
Also, we need to get a schedule together for our times that we can be at the park for the Railroad Days to cover the council tent. So we'll get a schedule together for that as well. And that's all I have. We'll move on to manager's report.
Okay, thank you. I do have a few things this evening. One, just with regards to the council booth at Railroad Days, if council could just let Jenny or I know if there's any special equipment or pieces that you need to have at we'll have the tent, we'll have some table and chairs for you, as well as a banner. But if there's anything special you need, just let us know and we'll have it prepared. And the parade is at 9 o'clock. Historically, I think it's been more like 10, but a lot of the participants in the parade are also working at the festival. So the parade will be at 9 o'clock. It will line up at Roscoe Park. It will end at the high school. So we'll continue down Park to Central and turn on Jamaica. So hopefully everyone comes out to that. At the park, we have a Carlisle graduate who will be offering a free boot camp to the community. Emily Sands is a 2014 Carlisle graduate. She went to University of Rio Grande, specializing in sports and physical activities. Significant cross-country track superstar in her own right. But she is offering, beginning this Sunday, I understand, at 7 a.m., from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., near the Mary Beekler shelter, which is the shelter closest to the parking lot and closest to the restroom facilities. A boot camp, and she has described it as it is muscular strength and endurance is the name of the game in this boot camp. It's to raise your heart rate, build muscle and strength, and improve your overall fitness. Strength and cardio come together in this class to make for a great workout. She's indicated that the only thing you need to bring is a positive disposition and some water. And it's for all fitness levels, all ages, no cost, just trying to do something proactive in the community using our parks. So it's going to be, she has, I think, 3 or 4 Sundays earmarked to try to test it out to see the community response, but nothing better to do, get it in and out before church and have some fun. And Emily, if you don't know her, she is a ball of fire. She is super fun. You'll have a great time.
I've known Emily for a lot of years. She is a great young lady.
I don't think I've ever seen her not smile, to be honest with you. That's one thing I had. And then I did want to say a special thank you to our sponsors. We had, I believe, last count I had, we had 30 sponsors that helped us pull off a National Night Out. We had some in-town sponsors. We had some out-of-town businesses that have been long-term vendors of ours and have been very supportive of the Carlisle community that helped us out. But, and I'm going to plug our staff, without staff this would not happen. National Night Out is, the whole point of it is to promote police, fire, service, community partnerships and neighborhood camaraderie. So it's kind of an offshoot of the old style neighborhood block party, is to kind of get people out and get your neighbors talking and meet the people that help protect you on a daily basis. And that would be our staff. And so I do want to take this time to give them individual recognition, because I think we know them as a group of people, and it's nice to put a name with who they are. Our staff is phenomenal. If you went to the community event, you can tell that for them, this is not just a job. They care as much of this town, I think, as all of us sitting up here do who live here. So they serve with pride, and I think they need to get some extra kudos. In our police department, we do have Chief Bruck, Dave Zarnota, Taylor Armstrong, Jerry Krebs, Ethan Benz, Zach Mazzaros, and Justin Thurman. In our fire department, at the event, even though we have a much larger fire department, but at that event, helping out was Lieutenant Roger Hurley, Jake Warren, Michael Paul, Kelsey Davis, Corey Davis, Chantal Banks, and Holden Parker. And then a group that I think was probably, besides the group that handed out hot dogs, I think when I was there was the most popular booth was that by our service department. They had this awesome sand digging pit with an obstacle course, and the kids, the parents had to kind of back them out and make them wait their turn. It was so popular. So very special kudos to our service department. That would be Dan Casson, Mark Riley, John Thornton, Rick Dixon, and John Coffey. So I think our people know they're appreciated, but sometimes it gets a little forgotten. So I just want to let them know that they are definitely appreciated by me, by this community, and that's all I have this evening.
Okay, thank you. Committee reports, Community Events Committee. I think they met after our last council meeting.
Well, the agenda was first to pick a chair, and that ended up being me, so I'll take point on that. Thank you.
Okay.
The meeting itself for the Community Events Committee was to get underlying understanding what we were going to do. So what our agenda is to focus on the marketing of our local events. Example, National Night Out, Railroad Days. One of the things we're going to start working on soon would be the first Monday of December, which would be the tree lighting ceremony. My understanding that between the Carlisle Community Church and Hillcrest Baptist Church, there's multiple things that could go on that evening. The sooner we start on that, the more organized and hopefully the more successful that will be. As of this moment, we don't have another meeting set, but we will move forward and get more organized.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Finance Committee.
We did have a finance committee meeting prior to tonight's meeting. We did discuss two topics. The first of being a proposed amendment to the current tax code that allows for a income tax filing exemption for individuals that have no current or foreseeable taxable income, correct? So such as permanently retired or permanently disabled individuals. It gives them a little bit of paperwork to fill out to grant them an exception to where they do not have to file a return every year, given the fact that they have no taxable income. And that's on that's under first readings for tonight. It's on for a single reading, so we will discuss that in a bit. The second item Mr. Rushing discussed is the second quarter update for 2018. A couple of the highlights. When all the dust settled, it was reported that 10.4% more income tax was collected in 2017 than in 16, And year-to-date, we've collected 1.73, so almost 2% more in income than for this period last year, for 2018. So that's a positive. He went through fund by fund and gave an update, but I won't do that here. Funds are performing as expected, if not better than expected. There's no real anomalies. The only one was in the water department, and that's been explained. And it's a net effect because it's less coming in, but it's less going out as well. So it's a net effect. Other than that, a full copy of the second quarter finance report is included in tonight's meeting record, so everyone has access to that if they would like. That's all.
Okay, thank you. We have no old business or new business.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Under new business, I didn't know if council received the resignation.
I have that here.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
We did receive a letter of resignation from our community events board and committee from Ms. Shawn McAtee. So I would like to make a motion to accept her resignation from that committee.
We have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes.
I have one more thing also.
Okay.
With the departure of Mr. McEldowney, there was a few boards and committee seats that opened. The only one that I've heard from anyone on interest in filling is the Economic Development Committee meeting. Mr. Humphreys has indicated he would like to fill that seat. So unless anyone else would like to fill that seat, I would like to make a motion to appoint him to the Economic Development Committee in Mr. McEldowney's former seat.
Okay. We have a second?
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Abstain.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that all you have, Brad?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Under first readings of ordinances and resolutions, Resolution 1318 approving a variance to Section 1230.05 for 420 Sunset Drive. That is on for a single reading. May I have a motion to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings and have 1 reading by title only?
Mr. Mayor, would you prefer to discuss what is before them and before that motion?
We can.
Should we read the title first or just have a discussion? Just
We can read the title.
A resolution approving a variance to Section 1230.05 curbs and gutters of the zoning code for the single-family home at 420 Sunset Drive and is on as a single reading.
With the whole new concept of single reading, thought it best to kind of explain what the legislation is and why it's on for a single reading before council decides what they choose to pass. This is on to waive Section 1230.05. Section 30.05 is the requirement in our subdivision regulations of the zoning code that requires all improvements to be made to include curbs and gutters onto streets. There is a proposal, staff has received a request to build a single-family home on just approximately 5 acres of land on Sunset Drive. This is 5 acres of land, it's like 4.8 and change if I recall. It is probably better known to you as the back half of the post property that's on the corner of 123 and Sunset. The builder is Mr. Rod Morris, and he submitted plans. He had purchased the 5 acres, and he submitted plans to build a single-family home on the 5 acres. When he submitted the plans, it did not include improvements that were required by the zoning code when you build. That includes sidewalks, street widening, curbs and gutters, and attachment to our public water system. Planning Commission reviewed the the proposed plans at their August 2nd meeting. At that meeting, they reviewed the the requirements. Mr. Morris had requested that they waive those requirements so he could build his home. The code does allow Planning Commission the authority to grant waivers for attachment to public water, street widening, and sidewalk improvements, but the code does not grant the Planning Commission the authority to waive the requirement for curbs and gutters. Specifically, Planning Commission can only grant those in R1, M1, and M2 districts. The proposed lot is not zoned that, it's zoned as B3. So Planning Commission did not have the authority to flat out waive that requirement. So Planning Commission has opted to recommend formally to council, who does have the authority, that they grant the waiver of curbs and gutters at this property. So the reason why it's being on for a single reading is the developer has submitted the building plans and is waiting to build the home and is not able to build the home because waiting the outcome of this waiver before you. A single reading would allow council, without emergency language, to waive the 3 reading requirement by a vote of 5, but it does not waive the 30-day enactment period. So there still is the referendum period for the public, should they choose to exercise that option, but a single reading would have a 2-step process to waive the 3 readings and then to adopt the waiver request. So I believe Mr. Morris is here in the audience as well if you have any specific questions for him, but that is what is on tonight and why it's on for a single reading.
Okay, I wanted just to make a couple of my thoughts about it, just throw them out there. When he was going to do more than one home, I agreed with the curbs and gutters, but I'm just hearing this for the first time tonight, that he's only going to do the one home. And while everyone knows I'm related to him, we do not talk, every day. We're on with our lives. But my personal thing is that I think we need to think about is there is already a home there on several acres that was granted what he's asking for. And I feel like in any situation, be it Rod or anyone, I feel like we need to think about that. And that's just all I have to say tonight when we go to vote, because I can't vote.
Right. And with all due respect, if you're going to abstain for familiar relationship, you should abstain for all conversation as well.
Okay.
I would like to expand that this has been visited once before. I have looked at the layout. I did come to the Planning Commission meeting. There isn't a discussion that there isn't going to be more homes built. It's just that there aren't any plans of building one now. Of the 4.8 acres-ish, the property that is to be built first, the first home would be to its closest immediate neighbor, closest to the rail spur, allowing the other land to be subdivided later. This has already came to council. It's already been, I believe it failed at as far as actually being a first reading. Well, it's a first.
There's no motion
It
made.
failed by.
It failed by not having a nomination to have a vote. So this is something that's already been visited. It's already been told no. I don't care for the single reading, and I just wanted to go ahead and voice my opinion before we move forward.
If there's one thing before there's further discussion, just to clarify what would be different from this particular action before council and the previous Sunset Estates, and I think it's important to note that Planning Commission has granted all the waivers except for curbs and gutters.
Right.
So Mr. Morris would have the ability to build his home, but he would have to install curbs and gutters. So he would not have to widen the street because Planning Commission did not tie the street widening requirement like they did previously with the curbs and gutters. They approved him not having to widen the street. So it is possible, I don't know how feasible it would be, but it's possible that if he wanted to, he would be in compliance by building his home, installing the curbs and gutters, which would, in fact, for that portion of Sunset, narrow the street because there is no widening component that was required by Planning Commission. Now, if we get into that situation where we have council that is not wanting to waive curbs and gutters, which is, you have the authority to do, we would have a disconnect, and I'm not sure at that point legally what we would do. That's what makes this one different from what was presented to you, is Planning Commission with the Sunset Estates did tie street widening with curbs and gutters as a package deal. They did not do that in this situation.
Good evening. My name is Scott King. I'm here on behalf of Rod Morris. I'd like to speak, but I'm waiting for a good opportunity.
Come to the podium.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Scott King. I'm an attorney. I have the pleasure of representing Rod Morris. I have some additional documents that I would submit for council's consideration that actually address some of the issues you've already been discussing.
Yes, please.
And the first thing I do want to point out is something that has already been pointed out. While this matter was before council in March, this is a completely different proposal. In March, they were proposing having 5 slightly less than 1 acre lots. This is for a single parcel, one 4.8 acre lot, with a single residence to be put on it. So this is a different issue, and I'm going to come back to that again when we go through some of the documents. The first page is a map showing the area that we're talking about. This was the Post property. Prior to 2013, the Post owned the property all the way down to the tracks on Sunset. That was sold in 2013 to Mr. Boyer. And again, as already has been mentioned, Mr. Boyer constructed a single-family residence on that property. The proposal currently before Planning Commission was to build a house adjacent to that property. After the council voted down or didn't consider the prior proposal, Mr. Morris made a proposal to Mrs. Duffy to inquire whether this property could be eligible for a lot split. Your code allows a lot split for what's called a minor subdivision. This parcel fell within that category. If you look at the second page, you'll see that there's an application for a minor subdivision or lot split. Again, the proposed use that you're being asked to consider is for a one-house residence for Mr. Morris on this property. The next page is a survey. The survey reflects the subdivision or the split of these lots. The lot split was approved by Mrs. Duffy in accordance with section 1222.11 because it falls within the parameters. Going on to the next couple pages, you'll see a general warranty deed from the Posts, and that's for the remaining acreage. But what I want to direct your attention to is the next warranty deed. The Posts conveyed this property to Mr. Morris and his wife. This is for a residence for Mr. Morris and his wife. This is not like the proposal that you had been asked to consider earlier. Mr. Morris has submitted a building permit application that is also contained within these materials. It is Mr. Morris's view that the approval of the building permit is something that could be accomplished administratively. Mr. Morris does not believe that the subdivision regulations apply after there has been a lot split into a single-family residential lot. But nonetheless, Mr. Morris went through Planning Commission and has already been discussed. Planning Commission approved this unanimously with one exception, and that was an exception for curbs and gutters, and Planning Commission left that issue to council. If you go back to the front page, Mr. Morris, if he were required to construct curbs and gutters, would be constructing an orphan. There's no curbs and gutters on the other side of Sunset. There's no curbs and gutters on the north to the parcel the post retained, and there's no curbs and gutters to the south. There literally would be an orphan piece of construction that would interfere with stormwater drainage and potentially interfere with safety, because it would simply be sitting there by itself. Mrs. Duffy has already mentioned that given the current width of the road, we would have a parcel with curbs constructed that narrowed the existing road. For all these reasons, this is a different proposal than what was before council earlier, and for all these reasons, Mr. Morris would request that you approve this proposal. As Mrs. Duffy alluded to, Mr. Morris is here to answer any questions that you may have, and I would be happy to answer any questions if anything I've said has raised any concerns or inquiry. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. This is a different dynamic. Obviously, there was a mistake made on the first section down there of Mr. Boyer's property. My biggest concern is, I know this property across the street is going to be developed. I've spoken with the property owner, and he has indicated what his thought process is, but I'm not sure when he's going to act on that. And with the facility that he kind of talked about, if that's where he still is planning on putting it, I kind of feel like it's going to generate some traffic down through there. We definitely don't want to narrow the street, and if the rest of it has been approved to not widen the street, then I certainly don't want to narrow the street.
And if I can explain how it was approved under the provision of a minor lot split. That is something that can happen if certain criterion are met at a management level. A minor lot split was approved for this 5 acres. A minor lot split was approved by previous administration for the Boyer property. It has been done. But in the code, and reason why Mr. Morris went through the planning commission process was that the manager does have the ability to approve lot splits without it being formally platted. If it's no more than 5 lots or parcels less than 5 acres inside after it's already been completely subdivided. So the original parcel of land would have been the entire post property, which would included the Boyer residence. So when the Boyer property was split off, it became 2 lots. So now the property under question has been split, so now we're at 3 lots. So one of the concerns I think Planning Commission did briefly discuss, and I think I hear some concern, is if that in the future Mr. Morris would want to split off part of his property, he would need to go through a similar process. The minor subdivision lot split allows management to do the lot split, but it specifically says that it's not contrary to applicable subdivision or zoning regulations. So although I can approve the lot split, I do not have the authority to waive any of the requirements, sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. Only Planning Commission, only council can. So if in the future Mr. Morris would, or he sells the home to somebody else down the road, like all of our homes could be sold, and future homeowners wanted to split off that lot, it would have to go through an approval process, because each item is a new issue with the zoning code. So, you know, that even though the Boyer property was done the way it was done or not done, you know, this is its own issue. And what would be applicable on current zoning codes with this particular issue. And the same would apply if there would be a proposed future lot split in the future. It would not automatically get the same waivers. It would be a new lot under new consideration that would have to go through the same waiver process if that homeowner wanted to. So, for example, the property across the road, that would be examined at that time under the current code, under those conditions with the property. So I just...
I could add.
It's up to him.
Yes, go ahead.
So actually, it can't happen the way it happened this time. It cannot happen again. The minor lot split says an original tract shall be considered to have been completely subdivided. I'm sorry, let me start over. You can't do it unless there are less than 5 parcels, and an original tract shall be considered to have been completely subdivided when all the lots created as a result of any subdivision are less than 5 acres.
And we've done that. So
And-
now it's under 5 acres.
So,
Okay.
so now this can't happen again. It would have to go.
So
if in the-
it had to be platted, so it would have to go through the formal process. Thank you for clarifying that. It would have to start with planning commission.
Correct. So again, that's why this is, once again, just a different animal than what's
Thank you
there
for pointing
before.
that out.
Thank
Valid
you.
point.
Is the intention to do lot splits later on and try to continue to build more homes? Or are you going to build in the center of it and have a 5-acre lot, or what is the plan?
At this point, there's no plan for anything in the
Jack,
future.
can I
It's
put the
as
microphone?
proposed. It's one house on one lot at this point, so.
The plan does show that you've got the.
I'm sorry, Mr. Morris.
Could you come up to the podium, Mr. Morris?
The plan right now is just to build one house on one lot. The property is situated on the south side, closer to the Boyer property. There's a couple reasons I did that. Number one, to get further away from the highway. Number two, it'll offer a walkout basement because the ground slopes there and there's more trees back in that corner. Third reason, obviously, it gives me flexibility in the future. If I decide I don't want to take care of that much ground, I could have the ability to come back and subdivide it more.
So just so we're clear, as presented, I mean, it would have to go through,
Yes.
future lot splits on his acres would be forced to go through
And
the planning commission.
honestly, I can't make the numbers work with 5 lots. So if I came back and subdivided it, it would be a small cul-de-sac or something, more than likely that would be 8 or 10 lots or something. But that gives me the flexibility now with where the house is set, but I don't have any plans on doing that right now, so.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other discussion?
Just a comment.
Comment.
Regardless of how it was handled the first time, or even how the votes went the second time, to me, I think sidewalks, water, curb gutters, street widening, I think, to me, those are almost a package deal, and it seems silly to waive all of them but one. So regardless of how I feel about the other ones that were approved, to me, I think it's unnecessary to stick for one of them and not the others. That's just a comment.
I would agree with Mr. McIntosh. I guess I don't know if it's a concern. I guess my only thought process on it is yes, we understand that the Boyer property was waived for them. And now we offer the opportunity to waive it for Mr. Morris to build his house. If he does go back to planning commission and subdivide and go through the formal process and that's the same process again, it comes up to the same question. Well, we did it for that, now we did it for this, so now we feel obligated to do it for this. So then if we subdivide it into a small subdivision throughout, not two wrongs don't make a right, and I don't mean it to come out that way, but once the precedent is set and we follow through with that precedent, even if it's the right precedent or the wrong precedent, that opportunity, because then we look at it, well, we did it for this one and this one, are we really we're not going to say no, this one has to do it, because as Ms. Duffy's already presented to us, and you have mentioned too, Planning Commission already voted to waive everything but that. So we say yes to this, but we say no to the next one. We're going to make that road smaller and narrower and a tiny section of it the closer you get to Central, to the busiest road through Carlisle. That's my only concern, is that if it comes back to be subdivided yet again, we're going to look at it the same way as we're looking at it now and feel obligated to allow the waivers to go through because we've done it twice already and make the road narrow.
And having a previous conversation with our law director, using the word precedents, and I have an attorney in the room and I apologize, I'm not one. There is no precedence. When it comes to the zoning code, each waiver, each consideration is valued independently. I mean, you do want connectivity to the best that you can to the code, but, you know, just because this was granted does not automatically mean that it's granted forever for everybody else. And
No,
I see you
no.
talking at the bit.
I agree that it's not, I'm meaning in a setting that we're in now, we're going to look back at what we already waived for this one, what was already waived for on Boyer. So if it does come to us again after it's gone to planning commission, even though it's not so much a precedent because it's been done before, but it's going to be a weight in our decision being made versus what we've done in the past, whether it be the same panel who's here or new people coming in.
Even when the Sunset Estates was discussed, as I recall, there was more conversation at Planning Commission. But when those waivers were considered, part of the discussion was looking at the connectivity issue to the south of Sunset, and that they recognized there was a difference on that street from one side to the other. And so for conformity. Thank you. And, you know, that was the rationale, as I recall, Planning Commission at that time, looking at that particular lot. There wasn't as much discussion, so I'm guessing, but I think that was similar considerations. So it's not precedence, but it's looking at how does it fit in with the neighborhood.
No, I mean, regardless of what you think of the waivers, I mean, I don't know how you can ask someone to put in curbs and gutters after you've already waived street widening.
I agree.
I don't necessarily agree with those waivers, but they were granted. You gotta have, I think there's some common sense and some, not really just common sense and using judgment on this as presented, what's been presented, and it seems silly to, you know, four waivers have been granted, and we only, for whatever reason in the charter, we have the ability for this one.
It's in the code, so
Right.
it is also possible if you
But
change the
as
code,
it
but
sits
not
right now,
for this
that is what it is. So regardless of how I feel about the others, it would seem silly not to grant this one.
Any other discussion? May I have a motion to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings, have 1 reading by title only.
So moved.
Second.
We've already read the goat roll call.
Mr. Humphries?
No.
Ms. Tankersley?
Abstain.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Given the fact that the other waivers have already been granted in Planning Commission, I do not have a problem with the single reading. Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes.
Okay, we're at that is a vote of 4. To waive the 3 readings requires a vote of 5. So based on the lack of 5,
And I'm not allowed to vote at all.
my saying is because of the familiar relationship that you would need to abstain.
But I have no monetary connection with Rodney at all. Nothing that he does
There's only
is,
5 people here. Normally we should have 7. Is that how many you normally have?
Normally we would have 7, but we have 1 vacancy.
So we have 6.
We have 6 that are eligible to vote.
nothing that he does or doesn't do affects my life in any way.
All I can do is provide you with a recommendation. The recommendation of our law director was that there is not enough separation because of relationship, that there is the,
Basically, it goes back to a first reading, and then it would be 3 readings in 30 days, correct?
yes. So, yeah, so you would not be, because the 33 readings did not have 5 votes, it cannot be enacted tonight. But it can continue on the process for 3 readings, and then it would take a vote of 4 to pass.
Okay.
But if you want, I can try to get our law director on the phone to see about Mrs. Tankersley's question regarding
I would like that
Abstention.
simply because I have no monetary interest in this whatsoever. Not, like I said, nothing he does or doesn't do is going to affect me. And the only reason that I ask that I can vote is because there is not a full council here. I know, I should abstain, I understand that, but even you saying I'm not even allowed to discuss it, I'm not real sure I agree with that, because I am part of the council. But if you could get him on the phone and ask him, because
Anything we do would be a recommendation, just like you said that you believe you should abstain.
right.
I think that's answering your own question.
I think if we had a full council, I wouldn't be asking this, but because we don't, I don't think it's fair. Just because of the situation that, he has to carry this out farther. If I were benefiting from him building that or in any way, I totally wouldn't even be
And I
asking
understand.
this.
I don't think anyone's accusing you. It's more about the appearance of impropriety. That's why there needs to be
But
the
I've
separation.
abstained always when we had a full council. I've never tried to ask to.
And I think the philosophy is valid, whether or not it's a council of 5 or whether it's a council of 7. It's about the philosophy. But I'm more than welcome if you want to take a recess to call our law director for his opinion.
That'd be fine.
So do you need a motion to go into recess?
Motion to go into recess for 5 minutes.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley?
You can motion to go to recess.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. We'll take a short recess here while Mrs. Duffy contacts our law director. What is the law director's recommendation?
Can we discuss, or we have to discuss in regular,
go
back
back
in
in-
session?
Okay. Motion to go back in regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. We're now back in regular session.
I spoke with our law director about the procedural issues. Mrs. Tankersley spoke to him regarding the issue about abstaining. I don't know if that's even the correct word or not, so she did receive some guidance from him on that. On the procedural issue, for it to be reconsidered because a vote was already happened on the 3 readings, there would need to be a motion to reconsider the waiving of the 3 readings. Would need to be a vote, so you need a motion and a second. If you want to readdress that question, then there would be a new vote on the 3 readings. So before it to become back to the table, we would need a motion to reconsider, is the advice I was given. And then Ms. Tankersley will,
What was the advice the law director gave you, Mrs. Tankersley?
Okay, he told me that he can't tell me yes or no at this point because I'm not voting on the final. I'm voting on a council procedure for how we're doing this today. And because we are down 1 council person, he left it completely up to me as to what I wanted to do. But I'm not allowed to vote on, I'm only allowed to vote on the council issue of the 1 single reading.
the way it was explained to me by our law director, just to clarify, is that we have 2, the original adoption was a 2-vote process. 1 to waive the 3 readings and 1 to adopt. The 3 readings is a procedural vote. The merits of the case were in the 2nd vote. In his opinion on this particular case, he says normally anything attached to the merits of the case, even if it's a procedural issue, should be dealt with as a package view. So if you abstain on 1, his recommendation is you abstain on both. However, it is up to Mrs. Tankersley to decide what she would choose to do, but if she would choose to vote on the procedural issue, it would be on the procedural aspect of it, and that would not be voting on the merits of it. So his recommendation was that procedural and merits are tied together. So, but if she did choose to vote, she is voting on a procedural aspect of it. She is not voting on merits. Did I misspeak?
No, no, I mean, that's exactly how it is, but, yeah.
So you can vote for
I
the
can-
single reading, but not for the actual.
And I didn't ask to vote for the actual part of it. I just asked him because I am a council member, and this is something that a member of the village has asked to do. Can I vote on the council procedure tonight, but not on anything beyond that?
And he left that up to you.
He left that completely up to me, yes.
Anything that he does is a recommendation. He cannot stop any of us from doing anything. He's law director's recommendation. His recommendation was.
What he said before, but I
Procedural
won't
merits
get into that.
are tied.
Do we have a motion?
And just so
Two.
for clarification, just on the number here, if there is a motion to reconsider that, and a second, it requires a simple majority of vote, a vote of 4 to reconsider. That brings when the vote, if that happens, then a motion would be made in a second to waive the 3 readings. That still takes a vote of 5 to waive the 3 readings. Then, if we get past that step and the 3 readings are waived, the vote to adopt would go back to a vote of 4 minimum, because we're not waiving the enactment period and invoking emergency language. So it kind of depends on what happens on the first vote, what would happen if there would need to be a second vote and if there need to be a third vote. But as it stands right now, it is on for a first reading unless there is a motion to reconsider.
I'm just going to extend my comment that basically this formality of what we're doing is just reversing what we've already chose not to even have a nomination for in prior months. Thank you.
With the exception of a planning commission changing what they recommended.
Okay.
I mean, I understand totally what you're saying, but planning commission totally changed what they did in their meeting as well.
What they did is a meeting that I went to, they basically put it in our lap to choose not to have to worry about it themselves. That's my opinion.
I will not disagree with that.
So we have no motion, so we go to a first reading.
I'll make a motion to reconsider. I think we're up here to vote. I think there's been a history on council and planning commission to avoid difficult decisions by not making motions. A motion isn't a vote, so we still do have to vote. I have no problem voting. I think that's why we're here. So I'll make a motion to reconsider the vote.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Have a second by Mr. Jewett. Roll call.
Ms. Tankersley?
It's a motion to reconsider, yes, a procedural.
Yes. Motion to, reconsider, yes.
Mr. Humphries?
No.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. So may I have a motion to suspend the rule requiring 3 readings, have 1 reading by title only?
I'll make that motion.
I will second.
Roll call.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
No.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. Any further discussion? Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second. I think we're here to vote.
Roll call.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
No.
Ms. Tankersley?
Abstain.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. Mr. Morse, by what I've been told by the law director, your variance has been granted.
Thank you guys, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll move on to ordinance 1418, amending chapter 881 income tax to add tax filing exemptions. And that is on for a single reading also. Mr. Rushing, would you like to address council there?
All right, well, good evening, Mayor, members of council. I get the fun part of the meeting, get to talk about taxes now. Yay, taxes. Before you, for your consideration, is an amendment to our tax code. For those of you sit on the finance committee, this will be redundant, but for the rest of council, I'll get you up to speed. And before I begin, I want to introduce our tax administrator, Ms. Denise Keir, who's here. Obviously, she does the income tax office, works there on a day-to-day basis. So she's here answering questions you may have on the nuances or day-to-day business of a tax office. And I'd also like to mention, she's been here for just over about a year and a half now. And in that year and a half, she has done a great job learning the many complications and nuances of municipal tax code. As we all know, the state has continuously changed tax law that we have by default of being a creature of the state are forced to enact. And although it can be frustrating at times, she has been a great employee for the village. So I just want to commend her on her work. As mentioned, before you is an ordinance to amend the current tax code. What staff is recommending is amending the tax code so that it allows a prescribed form for individuals who are permanently disabled or permanently retired, have no current income, and as well as no foreseeable income, have the ability to fill out a form prescribed by the tax administrator to be exempt from filing an income tax return from the village. Currently, the village has mandatory tax filing regardless of income liability. So if you're 18 years or older, you have to file a tax return with the village. What this means is that, let's say you're, quite frankly, 90 years old, let's say, and you've been on Social Security for 25 years, and you had no taxable income for that entire time, you're still required to file a tax return. What, as Ms. Keir has noticed, has been comments from residents, citizens, and comments and research from other communities looking at, do all communities require mandatory filing? And what our research has found was that not all communities have mandatory filing. They do have an option for residents to fill out a form. It's not automatic. It's not granted. It's not carte blanche by any means. But to fill out a form stating that you're either permanently retired or permanently disabled, provide documentation, provide proof stating that you're either receiving, for example, VA benefits and you're permanently disabled, or Social Security, or through one of the state retirement systems, to fill out the form, provide a proof, submit it to the tax office, and once it is approved, we will go in and activate the tax account so that you no longer have to file an annual tax return. This is more or less a convenience and a customer service tool so that we do have residents who do forget to file, but they have no tax liability. They have not had tax liability for years. They have no foreseeable tax liability, and they forget, and then we have to send them correspondence for non-filing, and if need be, even send them to the mayor's court for court action for not filing, even when they have no tax liability, and the most we would ever receive from a court case like that would be a $25 late fee. We view it, staff views it as a way to not only provide a customer service tool, but also provide relief from the tax administrator, Ms. Keir. She spends many hours every single day auditing accounts, reviewing, sending correspondence to non-filers, processing them through court, and then the court has their own process that they have to adhere to. So it's a lot of staff hours for going through this procedure that many of our residents, again, have no tax liability, and it's seen as a hindrance. So by adopting this exemption, all we're saying is that we still mandate tax returns filing for our residents if you have taxable income, but rather if you provide proof, if you sign the form and it's approved by the tax office, then you will be exempt from having to file. Again, this is not automatic, this is not in any ways reducing any revenue. We would actually hope that, it would decrease the cost of doing business and, improve the work efficiency of the tax office, not have to process as many non-filing letters. Not having been here for too long, it's my knowledge that in previous years, the tax administrator, before Denise, has informally inactivated accounts, just as a courtesy. But this is a good way to kind of clean up that courtesy and make it formal and give management a tool to address this in a fashion that is a set procedure. We know what we're doing. We know what documentation we need so that moving forward it is unbiased and it's available for all residents. It is on as a single reading due to the fact that our third vendor, which processes, prints, and actually mails the tax returns, they have many other customers. So there, it may not seem like the end of the end of the year is coming. It is. So we need to get their information to them as soon as possible. This will allow us staff the time to process and get the information to our printer so that they can print it in time for the end of the year. That is what our goal is this evening. The memo is in your packet, as well there's a memo from Denise beneath mine, as well as the proposed ordinance and the language for that. Denise and I are here to answer any questions if you have any.
Appreciate your work on that. I think it's a common sense initiative and a convenience, so thank you for that.
Yes, I do too. I agree.
I think it's a good idea. I know my grandmother has received those where she lives, and she gets all worried and confused and stuff, so
Sure.
I think it's a very good idea.
And that's what came about. Denise approached me from receiving comments from customers as they come through. So I do obviously commend. This is all Denise, and she has done a great job working here.
My question is where it says for the past 5 years, there have been more than 500 tax returns. So my question is that 100 for each year, or there's actually 500 within our municipality, within our veteran community of legacy people retired from Armco, General Motors,
Sure.
places of that nature? We have that many?
Well, there's at least 500 every year. That doesn't, when you break it down by name, a lot of those are the same every year, but some of them obviously are not. Some of them could be just people who didn't have income for that year for whatever reason. But they would not, there are specific requirements, so they have to be either permanently retired or permanently disabled to qualify. So not everybody that's in there, but the vast, I would say probably 2/3 to 3/4 of those people are the same people every year, so.
Looks like a great avenue. Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
May I have a motion to suspend rule requiring 3 readings and have 1 reading by title only?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. Any further discussion? Motion to adopt?
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. Ordinance 1418 has been adopted. We have no second or third readings tonight. We do have an executive session on personnel to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. Possible action after the executive session. So at this time, I have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. We are now in executive session. We have a motion to go back into regular session.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. We have a motion to appoint Ms. Brandy Peets to the Park Board.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes. Congratulations, Brandy Peets. You are now a member of the Park Board.
We now have 3.
We can meet.
We have a motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Yes.
Ms. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Bicknell?
Yes.
Mr. Humphries?
Yes.
Mayor Winkler?
Yes, we are adjourned.